Friends and travelers, however you've arrived, I bid you welcome. Here at Let's Be Frank, we're about lives, and above all, living well. But I don't suppose a podcast hosted by Benjamin Franklin could be about anything else. In my lifetime, I pursued the practice of moral improvement like a science, recording my successes, and yes, oftentimes reveling in my failings. It's my hope, with our weekly almanac, to deliver to a curious world delicious morsels of history in quick, easy to digest installments, perfect for a sit in your favorite chair or a morning walk to work. At the end of each installment, I like to wrap it up in a neat little lesson you can apply to your own life, taken from the events, stories, and personalities shared in each episode. So sit back, relax, and together, let's make history. Greetings and salutations, dear listener. Welcome to another installment of Let's Be Frank, an auditory almanac for the curious mind, with me, your faithful friend and host, Dr. Benjamin Franklin, printer. Follow B. Franklin Live across our varied social media platforms, B. Franklin Live on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and Facebook at Let's Be Frank, an auditory almanac for a curious mind. If you love the wit and wisdom of Let's Be Frank, consider joining our Patreon Junto and support us as we try to empathetically connect the present with the past. You may have noticed, my beloved Junto, that Benjamin Franklin has taken another step into the limelight. Apple Plus is releasing a 6-part miniseries about my time in France, heavily influenced by Stacy Schiff's A Great Improvisation, Franklin, France, and the Birth of America, a work I cannot recommend enough. Now, my friends and I at Primary Source Media will be getting together every week after the new episode releases to share our thoughts about the series, what it gets right, what it aggrandizes, as well as some of the history surrounding it. You can catch it live when the conversation happens, or join our respective Patreons to catch the conversation. We hope to see you there for our own miniature great improvisation. With that out of the way, let's get to today's installment. Now, my friends, what comes to mind when you think of Benjamin Franklin? Perhaps it's the sagacious statesman, the cunning diplomat, the absent father, or, let's be honest, the lecherous ladies' man. Let's be frank, dear listener. The show is all about being frank. With the absence of history in today's cultural correspondence, the image of Ben Franklin might simply stay on the $100 bill, with all the stories that earned my place there lost in the ether and effluvium of modern life. But one thing rises regarding the life of Benjamin Franklin, a magnum opus mingling myth and matter, and that, my beloved Junto, is Ben Franklin, the man who commanded the lightning from the sky and bade it purr. By the time I arrived in France, I had commanded enough celebrity to carry the given title, the Electric Ambassador. John Adams will remark in 1790, "The history of our revolution will be one continued lie from one end to the other. The essence of the whole will be that Dr. Franklin's electrical rod smote the earth, outsprung General Washington, that Franklin electrified him with his rod, and thenceforward these two conducted all the policy negotiations, legislation, and war." If I, Dr. Benjamin Franklin, was America's first influencer, the kite experiment is what made me go viral. And nearly 300 years later, my beloved Junto, it's still trending. This season's arc is Snatching Lightning, and it will lead up to that famed experiment, as it happened, warts and all, and surmise if the famed experiment merited the global celebrity and response for this humble printer. For purposes of good order, this podcast is composed of several primary sources associated with Ben Franklin's life, knit together to collect it all into one narrative on a cohesive theme. Today's episode is the first installment in this season's through line, the long-awaited story of how a key and a kite helped shape our daily lives and give me far greater credit than any man's vanity should afford. Welcome, my friends, to part 1 of Snatching Lightning. In the discovery of hidden things and the investigation of hidden causes, stronger reasons are obtained from sure experiments and demonstrated arguments than from probable conjectures and the opinions of philosophical speculators of the common sort. William Gilbert, De Magnete, 1600. For part 1 of Snatching Lightning, we're going to travel over 2,000 years of human history and explore the lives and innovations of 3 fathers of electricity, beginning with the origins of its experiments. We'll start, my friends, with the true father of electricity, that, of course, of Thales the Miletian, and what the surviving histories of Diogenes, Plutarch, and Pliny the Elder have to say about him. Thales of Miletus was an ancient Greek philosopher, mathematician, and astronomer. He's often regarded as the first philosopher in Western history, and one of the 7 sages of ancient Greece. Thales was born around 624 BC in Miletus, now part of Turkey. Thales made significant contributions to various fields, including mathematics, geometry, and astronomy. Thales believed several things that he's renowned for: that water is the singular element from which all things are derived, the belief that everything is possessed of a fragment of a soul, and that certain pieces of soul attract to one and the other, much like magnets. Thales also applied his mathematical knowledge to practical problems. He accurately predicted a solar eclipse in 585 BCE and is said to have used his understanding of geometry to measure the height of the pyramids in Egypt. Now, Diogenes has this to say about Thales. But the first to use the term and call himself a philosopher or lover of wisdom was Pythagoras, for said he, "No man is wise, but God alone." All too quickly the study was called wisdom, and its professor a sage, to denote his attainment of mental perfection, while the student who took it up was a philosopher or lover of wisdom. Sophists was another name for the wise man, and not only for philosophers, but for the poets also. The men who were commonly regarded as sages were the following: Thales, Solon, Periander, Cleobulus, Chilon, Bias, Pittacus. Thales only makes a list of sages in Diogenes' works. Herodotus expands in a very brief sentence. Thales of Miletus had foretold this loss of daylight to the Ionians, fixing it with the year in which the change did indeed happen. Herodotus is speaking of a solar eclipse that Thales predicted, which Pliny the Elder will expand upon in Natural History. Thales the Miletian first investigated the subject in the 4th year of the 48th Olympiad, predicting the eclipse of the sun which took place in the reign of Alyattes. Now, as you can begin to surmise, my beloved Junto, there is not a great deal that survives about Thales the Miletian. So where does his work on electricity come in? Thales found that amber, when rubbed with silk, attracted objects. Thales discovered static electricity. In fact, the word electricity is a Greek word, deriving from electron or amber-like. This all came from the work that Thales did. Although much of Thales's work has been lost over time, his ideas and methods greatly influenced later philosophers and scientists. His emphasis on observation and rational thinking set the stage for the development of Western philosophy and scientific thought. Now, this work on static electricity would be picked up 2,100 years later by one William Gilbert, who was an English physician, physicist, and natural philosopher. He's widely recognized as the father of electrical studies and magnetism. In 1600, he published his seminal work, De Magnete, Magneticisque Corporibus et de Magno Magnete Teller, on the magnet, magnetic bodies, and the great magnet Earth. In this book, Gilbert provided the first comprehensive explanation of magnetism and introduced the concept of Earth as a giant magnet. In this work, Gilbert coined the term electrical energy. Again, returning to that root of amber-like, speaking of matters of attraction, of electricity being tied to magnetism. This work paved the way for Sir Thomas Browne. Sir Thomas Browne is a fascinating figure from history. I'll confess to you, my beloved Junto, in reading and preparing for this upcoming episode, I found myself on a complete tangent as I began to discover the work of Sir Thomas Browne, so much so that you can look forward to a future installment regarding his Pseudodoxica Epidemica. But for purposes of order, I'll continue down this avenue. Sir Thomas Browne was an English physician, philosopher, and writer known for his profound and wide-ranging works in various fields of knowledge. He was born on October 19, 1605, in London, England. Browne began his education at Winchester College and later attended Broadgates Hall, Oxford, where he studied medicine. Now, although Browne practiced medicine throughout his life, he's best known for his literary contributions. His most famous work is Religio Medici, The Religion of a Physician. In a time when questioning anything spiritually can garner skepticism, this work, exploring faith, reflecting on science, was a bold stance against established order and norm. Browne's curious mind and wide-ranging interest led him to explore various subjects in his writing. His work, Pseudodoxica Epidemica, Vulgar Errors, published in 1646, debunked prevalent superstitions and popular misconceptions of his time. Browne sought to promote critical thinking and a scientific approach to knowledge, challenging prevailing beliefs based on unfounded traditions. The Pseudodoxica Epidemica is what has me completely fascinated with Browne. Browne collected 200 widely held conceptions about the world, truths that people commonly believed, and he examined the root of them. He looked at them with a scientific and skeptical air. Do elephants indeed have joints? Why do we say bless you when we sneeze? Did Adam and Eve have belly buttons? And it was in this work that he coined the words electricity, pertaining again to magnets. Browne says in chapter 1, the first and father cause of common error is the common infirmity of human nature, of whose deceptible condition, although perhaps there should not need any other eviction than the frequent errors we shall see ourselves commit, even in the express declarement hereof, yet shall we illustrate the same from more infallible constitutions, and persons presumed as far from us in condition as time, that is, our first and ingenerated forefathers, from whom as we derive our being and the several wounds of constitution, so may we in some manner excuse our infirmities in the depravity of those parts, whose traditions were pure in them, and their originals but once removed from God, who, notwithstanding, if posterity may take leave to judge of the fact, as they are assumed to suffer in the punishment, were grossly deceived in their perfection, and so weakly deluded in the clarity of their understanding that it have left no small obscurity in ours, how error should gain upon them. I am so incredibly excited by what I found in the Pseudodoxica Epidemica, I'm going to devote an entire episode to his enlightened work. But in regards to electricity, as you might have seen from these three forefathers, there's no connection yet to lightning. More to static electricity, magnetism, how objects attract and pull one in the other. For the present moment, the two phenomena, lightning and electricity, are two different things. We begin, my beloved Junto, to see the vacuum with which my famed experiment will find its hold. And very clearly, we have a good deal more ground to cover for part 2. The story, for now, remains to be continued. In the modern world, there is an illusion that we have all things sorted, all things discovered. We know the reason behind all things. We have the illusion of certainty. I was born into an age of experiments, wherein we began to see the world anew. The lesson for today's installment, my beloved Junto, is to begin searching for connections in your own life. Things that seem entirely unrelated, but may in fact be stemming from the same source in the scope of your life. Adopt a perspective of experimentation. Begin at this present moment to endeavor to define the various things in your life which may indeed be interconnected, coming from the same source, be it of fear, be it of sorrow, be it of sadness, be it of joy, be it of jealousy. See if you might identify the font from which the aspects of your life flow from. And when you develop your hypothesis, do not stop there. Find the experiments that you might discover to understand your place in the world better. That's all for today's installment. With that, we have more hours in the day, but as always, we have nothing but time between us. Resource materials and images from this week's episode can be found in the journal of bfranklinlive.com. If you like the show, subscribe and stay up to date with all the latest gossip, and do me the kindness of leaving a review. And, dear listener, as always, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your neighbors, tell your horse, I don't care. Let's make our intellectual junto grow. And now, dear listener, our time together must come to an end. Fare thee well, and always remember, when you are good to others, you are best to yourselves. Until we meet again, I remain your humble and obedient servant, Dr. Benjamin Franklin, Printer. Stay curious, my friends.